Hello, beautiful souls, and welcome to your September horoscopes for your zodiac sign. Now, this is how you're going to read for your sign. You're going to read first for your rising sign. If you do not know your rising sign, you want to go on a free 99 website like AstroSeek or astro.com. You punch in your data, your date of birth, location, and time, and then you will see your rising sign, which is also the ascendant. Then you're going to read for your ascendant sign. This is how I do the monthly forecasts because this will give you a bigger picture of where the transits are going through your own personal houses. Now, as a disclaimer, like always, this is based on just your rising sign. There's other things to take into consideration, like if you have any natal placements in and around the degrees that I mention. Another thing to keep in mind is that not all transits will impact you because they just won't. Like, that's why you want to look at the degree of the transit and if you have any placements around that specific transit. Try not to get into this mindset of, is this good or bad? Because only you can perceive of something as good or bad. Something that might be a challenging aspect for me or its transit might actually be something that ends up being a blessing in disguise later on. So I try not to say what is good or bad. I'll say, this is an auspicious day to start something. This might bring blessings down the road. This is a challenging transit that you might need to lean into, or you might be triggered on this day. That's how I try to do the forecast so that you are prepared and you're not blindsided by certain things that might happen. You also have to take into consideration your profection year, so your time lord, different like midlife transits. You know, there's people going through their Saturn return right now, which is different, which is a different experience than if you weren't going through a Saturn return. Some people are going through their midlife transits. They're going through their simultaneous Pluto and Neptune square. So there's all these different layers to take into consideration when you listen to this. And like I said, collectively, 2025, we're all going through massive changes. We're all being asked to show up in different ways to really work through our own bullshit, to heal our trauma. And then individually, we can narrow that down to certain things that we are going to be focusing on in our own transits. So, if you want to learn more about your own specific natal chart, I am teaching Astrology 101. I opened up my star school that starts October 6th. It's a 12-week class. We meet for 2 hours every Monday between 12 and 2 p.m. And I'm going to teach you how to read your natal chart so that when you listen to the transits and you remember, oh, I have a 5-degree sun in Aries. So then next year, the Saturn and Neptune conjunction in Aries is going to impact me. Stuff like that. It's really important to understand your natal chart when you listen to these transits, because like I said, not all transits are going to impact you. And also not all transits impact people the same way. So that is one way you can go deeper with me. And I mean, obviously you're listening to this. So if you are a Patreon member, you're getting this at the top of the month. If you want to become a Patreon member so that you could receive this in the beginning of the month versus like when it's, we're already going into mid-month, then you can be in the North Node. I believe I call it the North Node tier. It's $10 a month. And you can also listen to the monthly forecast that I do with Stephanie Campos, which we go day by day every single day of the month. In these monthly transits, I only really talk about the ones that would impact your rising sign, the most important ones. Obviously, the 2 lunations and any of your chart rulers, your planetary ruler changing signs or making significant aspects. If you want to come along with me every week in the forecast where I break it down day by day, that's free 99 on YouTube. But if you want to support my work, you can join the first tier of my Patreon, which you just pay $5. I think it's $5.55 a month to support my work. So that is how to engage with the content of the monthly forecasts. I obviously can't answer all of the questions you have if you are not a Patreon member. This is another benefit of being a member because if you're not a Patreon member and you're watching it in the general public, you're already catching this forecast in like mid-month when I've already, spent a lot of time putting this out for my Patreon members. So they get first priority. And then if you're watching just the clips of it, just know that I post the clips for marketing purposes, but there's a whole month of transits that give context to your experience. Because there were a couple of people that just watched the clips last month and they were like, yeah, but I'm a Libra rising and this Venus Cancer conjunction in my 10th house is not auspicious for me. I just got fired from my job. But if you had watched the full month forecast, I said that Venus and Jupiter, just because they're both benefics, doesn't mean that it's all going to be like rainbows and butterflies. So those are the disclaimers. Thank you so much for being here and thank you so much for supporting my work. Let's get to your sign. Hello, Aries rising. Welcome to your September forecast. So there are 5 major planetary ingresses this month between Mercury, which will change signs from Virgo to Libra, and then the equinox. So the sun will go from Virgo to Libra, and then Mars, which will go from Libra to Scorpio, and then Saturn, which will leave your first house and go back into the 12th. So let's start with that because there's a lot of activation going on in obviously your first and 7th house axes, yourself, and also your partnership house, and then your 6th and your 12th houses. So every Virgo season to Libra season, every September, you're going from 6th house topics to the 7th house topics. Now, September 1st, Saturn will retrograde back into Pisces in your 12th house. And I actually like this for you because Saturn has its joy in the 12th. Saturn can do its thing that it needs you to do when Saturn goes back into Pisces. So the reason why Saturn has its joy in the 12th is because this house is it's a cadent house based on the unseen and unknown. And so Saturn here will help you to recuperate and rest and take time of isolation. The 12th house is that time of day after the sun rises where everything that was visible in the sky, like all the stars in the dark, then become hidden by the sun's rise, right? So our relationship to the unknown and unseen is what also makes us fearful, right? Our relationship to what we cannot see oftentimes, or what we don't know, is what makes us fearful of the unknown. And so having the North Node here in Pisces is asking you, inviting you to believe in more in what you don't see than what you do see. This is such a great time for you to meditate, for you to go on a retreat, to take a lot of time alone to really process some things that might have happened to you that are kind of like have accrued over the course of your life, right? And I really think this is the case too, because the ruler of your 12th house, which is Pisces, is in your 4th of home, right? And the ruler of your 9th house, which is foreign lands and foreign travel, is in your 4th house. So I really hope that, for Aries rising, obviously, depending on your Mars placement, which is your chart ruler, are very ambitious people. You're go-getters. You're very active, right? You're a fire rising sign. But this is kind of the season to especially with the eclipses, is to be more internal and to really investigate your fears and to investigate your self-sabotaging behaviors and thoughts. And so Saturn here will help you do that. Saturn is the ruler of your 10th and your 11th too. So there is this period of maybe bringing the focus of your career and how you're showing up in the collective and just taking a little bit of a pause. Okay. And I know Aries rising people are very ambitious and they want to get shit done, but there is a season for everything. And it just so happens that Virgo season, you're also in a sixth house season, which is a cadent house. So, I guess I'm curious too for a lot of Aries rising, how Aries risings, how has it been with Saturn and Neptune in your first house? So if you have an Aries rising in and around like 0 to 3 degrees, you've been experiencing Saturn and Neptune on your ascendant. So clearly something is becoming more serious in nature, right? Saturn brings a level of a serious tone. Saturn wants three things. Saturn wants discipline, structure, and a plan. Okay, so on September 2nd, Mercury will ingress into the sign of Virgo. This is your sixth house. This could make you feel very busy, but I would caution this because the sixth house in astrology is the house of bad fortune. So you don't want to overwork here. You want to work smarter, not harder. You don't want to have to overcompensate for your feelings of insecurity or lack and doing more. Okay. Like I said, depending on your Mars placement, you want to make sure that for you, Aries rising, you're being careful of your energetic output and not doing so much, especially since your planetary ruler is changing from its detriment in Libra to its to its domicile in Scorpio in the eighth house later in the month. What I do like about Mercury here, though, is that it's in its exaltation and domicile. And on September 13th, there will be a cazimi between Mercury and the Sun. So this could just have you focusing more on your health, your physical, mental, spiritual rituals, and how you are sustaining your life. And I think this is really important, like I said, for Aries risings, just because your eclipses are happening in the 6th and 12th house axes. The more you can surrender again to a divine power, a higher power, like an ancestor, like a spirit guide, I think this will help you in the changes that might be happening in your life. Like I said, a lot of Aries risings might just feel more solitary in nature. On September 6th, Uranus will station retrograde at 1 degree of Gemini, which is your third house. So for Aries risings, you have been trying to do some kind of disruption in your third house, which is your neighborhood. The third house and all the cadent houses, so the cadent houses are 3rd, 6th, 9th, and 12th, talk about proximity and knowledge. So the third house being the closest one to us, which is the first, this is like our close neighborhood, right? The people around us. This is our siblings. This is our cousins, our aunties and uncles live here too. This is also communication and the power of our word. So our Aries risings being the community organizer. Are you protesting out on the streets? Are you speaking up on social media? Perhaps. Did you create a Substack to share your ideas? Uranus is the planet of disruption, of change, of revolution. And so Uranus now is retrograde in this third house. So it would have given you a clue as to what this transit might mean for you for the next 8 years. Before Uranus re-enters your second house of your personal income and finances. So a lot of Aries risings might have had a lot of disruptions in their personal finances and resources since 2018, since Uranus was trying to disrupt this area of your life and really trying to get you to think of creative ideas to make money, to receive money in some way. Um, let's see here. On September 7th, there's a total lunar eclipse at 2:08 p.m. Eastern Time at 15 degrees of Pisces. And this is happening in your 12th house. This is a full moon. So something is ending, something that has been holding you back, perhaps, something that has kept you that has kept you feeling imprisoned by your own making. I know this isn't the card that is associated with this, but what the image that's coming through my head is the Eight of Swords. This is like your own self-sabotaging thoughts and behaviors becoming so real that you hold yourself back. Now, this is a full moon, so something is ending, right? Now, what I love about this eclipse is that the ruler of this lunation is Jupiter in Cancer in your fourth house. So you are being supported in some way by your family, in your home life, by your private life. And the moon and Jupiter have mutual reception. So there is some luck here that your home life can be giving you a lot of stability at this time. But because this is a North Node eclipse, it's like whatever you are willing to let go of, you will find the benefic blessing later on. Like if you lose something, let's say you lose a job or you lose a relationship, in hindsight, later on, you'll see that this is actually a blessing in disguise. On September 13th, I already mentioned this transit. This is the Kazemi. It's very lucky. On September 18th, Mercury will ingress into Libra. So Mercury will go into your seventh house of one-on-one partnerships. Now, some of you might be renewing a contract, or you might be thinking of breaking a contract, since the seventh house is about your partnerships. It's also I forgot to mention this to another sign, it is your open enemies as well. So some of you might be thinking about your relationships and the contracts you have with them, okay? Since Mercury rules your sixth house and also your third house. You could also just be thinking about like your relationship to working. I know that sounds like not so sexy, but like, are you happy with what you're doing? I think that's a good question you can ask yourself at this time. And then on September 19th, which is the very next day, Venus will ingress into Virgo. So this is your sixth house. Venus rules your house of partnerships and also your second house of money. So, yeah, I think Venus is in its fall in Virgo. So, Venus is an independent sign when it's in Virgo. Venus pays attention to the detail. So this is where I was saying in the beginning when I was talking about Mercury here, be careful of not overworking or overgiving as a result of your lack of self-confidence and self-worth. Sometimes sixth house placements is like people don't see themselves or their potential because it's in an inconjunct to the first. And so oftentimes this is where we tend to like burn ourselves out by overdoing it because we don't believe in our own worth. And since Venus rules your second house of your own value and your own resources and your partnership sector and your alliances, you could be overgiving to compensate for something, so just be careful. But ultimately having the sixth house transit of Venus here and all like every Virgo season, you're really thinking about, your rituals. What are you doing to support your life? And can you step out of this perfectionism mentality? Because Virgos are very anxious signs and they tend to always ask themselves, how could this be better? How can we do this better? Which is great, right? Because we all want to master something, but you also don't want to get into the trap of perfectionism and not actually getting to do anything. All right, September 21st, we have a solar eclipse at 3:54 p.m. Eastern Time at 29 degrees of Virgo. So this is a solar eclipse in your sixth house. So some new routine, some new ritual, some new thing is happening in your sixth house. Now this is a south node eclipse, so please, please, please be careful of your health. Anyway, during eclipse season, you should be careful of of your health because the south node is going through the sixth house, and again, the sixth house is the house of bad fortune. The 12th house is the house of a bad day. The reason why these houses have these names is because they don't witness the first, which is us. Okay. So during this time, you want to be mindful of your mental health, your physical health. Because this is a South Node eclipse, something needs to be purged here, something needs to be released here. Now, this is a little challenging because it is opposing Saturn in Pisces in your 12th house. So you're coming up against some fear. You're coming up against some Saturnian energy here of like maybe a boss figure, maybe an elder figure who's like, no, or you've gotten a no and you can't move forward with something. So the solar eclipse is so interesting because it is a new moon, but something needs to end. So this might even be grappling with like, um, now our Aries risings self-aware enough, because I know a couple of Aries risings that are not self-aware. Are they self-aware enough to ask themselves, how have I played a role in other people's suffering? Because the sixth house is also the house of enslavement and like who you employ. And for example, I used to work with somebody. I worked for somebody who was an Aries rising, and she was a very narcissistic person who had no self awareness and was basically taking advantage of us. I don't know if she has enough self awareness to ask herself, how am I playing a part in other people's suffering? But this is something you can ask yourself because Saturn rules your 10th house of career. September 22nd, Mars will ingress into the sign of Scorpio. And the same day, this is the fall equinox. So, yeah, something is happening with your partnerships. You know, you go through this every Libra season. The focus will be on your alliances. If you're married or if you have a partner, the focus will be on your partnerships and who you have to support you, and also to support you personally and financially, since Mars is going into your eighth house of shared income and resources, and Mars is your chart ruler. So as Mars transits through Libra, your focus would have been more on your partner at that time. Now that Mars is going into the eighth and it's in its domicile, this is like, okay, now it's my turn. Am I getting the resources that I need to make my shit come true? And this might be tied to your partnership, to be honest with you, because again, this is Libra season. This is the focus is going to be on your alliances and your one-on-one relationships. So, Aries risings, please write in the comment section how you've been doing with Saturn and Neptune in your first house. And I wish you all the luck. And, you know, I'm an Aries sun, so I know that you'll be able to get through this month with grit and determination. Thank you, and see you next month.